The warm autumn sunlight of Connecticut streamed through the window of Martha Hamilton's examination room. The soft evening light gently illuminated the pediatrician's credentials hanging on the wall. She closed a patient file on her desk and briefly thought about her own child before calling in the next patient. Emily, her 13-year-old daughter, was a girl who faced her illness with a positive attitude. She had been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when she was 8. Emily had always bravely endured the pain of daily insulin injections on her small body. Now she was popular at school, and there wasn't a day Martha didn't feel proud of her bright and intelligent daughter. "Dr. Hamilton, your next patient is ready," said Jessica, the young nurse. Martha snapped back to reality. She took her smartphone out of her white coat pocket and checked a message from Emily. "Mom, my reading is 115 today." "Don't worry, I'm fine." Martha smiled and replied, "Wonderful. Dinner at 7. I'll make your favorite salad. Love you." 15 years since she began working at St. Margaret's Children's Hospital. Even now, as a pediatrician known by everyone in the area, she returned to being just a mother at the end of each day. As a single mother, she sometimes felt lonely, but Emily's smile made everything worthwhile. When Martha returned home after finishing her appointments, an unexpected sight awaited her. A familiar car was parked at the entrance. "Emily, I'm home," she called. Entering the living room, she found her mother Helen and her sister Nancy sitting there. Emily was next to her grandmother, acting like a queen. "Martha, you don't need to be so strict with Emily all the time," Helen said with her usual critical tone. She gave her daughter a stern look. In contrast, Nancy had always been her mother's favorite. "Mom, it's medically necessary," Martha replied quietly. "Emily needs to monitor her blood sugar regularly and manage her diet. But let her have sweets once in a while. She's a child, after all." Martha took a deep breath. This conversation always went in the same direction. And her mother's visits were always accompanied by tension. "It's been a while, Nancy," Martha said, trying to change the subject. Nancy had a 15-year-old son named Toby, but he wasn't with her today. "Toby is with his father," Nancy explained before being asked. "He got into trouble at school again last week. His teachers don't understand his learning disability." Helen immediately defended her grandson. "He's special. People just don't understand his talents." Martha listened silently. She understood Nancy and Toby's struggles. But her mother and sister always blamed external factors for his behavioral problems. With proper support, Toby might be able to cope better. While preparing dinner, Martha learned that her mother and sister would be staying through the weekend. Nancy's apartment had a water leak and was temporarily uninhabitable. That night, after Emily had gone to bed, Martha was preparing for an important meeting tomorrow. She had recently proposed a new treatment program for diabetic patients, and tomorrow was the final presentation. The ringtone of her phone broke the silence. "Dr. Hamilton, I'm sorry to inform you that Emily has been admitted to the emergency room." Martha stood up, feeling the blood drain from her face. "I'll be right there." But thinking about her meeting, she hesitated. The presentation could potentially impact the treatment of hundreds of children. Looking into the living room, she saw her mother and sister watching television. "Mom, Nancy, Emily's been admitted to the hospital. I have an important meeting tomorrow morning. Could you two visit Emily in the morning?" Helen and Nancy exchanged glances. "Of course," Helen answered. "Leave it to us." "Thank you," Martha sighed with relief. "Make sure she doesn't eat anything until the doctor gives permission." She rushed to the hospital. Emily had suffered a hypoglycemic attack, but fortunately, prompt treatment had stabilized her. The doctors said further tests were needed, and Martha reluctantly left her daughter's side to return home. The next morning, Martha got up early to prepare for her meeting. Her mother and sister had left before her. "Thank you for looking after Emily," she left in a message. In the middle of her presentation, her phone vibrated. It was from the hospital. "Dr. Hamilton, please return immediately. Your daughter's condition has deteriorated." Martha felt as if her heart had stopped. She left the meeting and jumped into her car. Her mind was in chaos. What had happened? Why had her condition suddenly worsened? Images of her mother and sister flashed through her mind. A sense of unease enveloped her as something felt wrong. In the car heading to the hospital, Martha repeatedly prayed, "Emily, hang on. I'm coming right now." It had been 3 months ago. A family Thanksgiving dinner was taking place at Martha's house. Around the table were Martha and Emily, along with Helen, Nancy, and Toby. Outside the window, an early snow had begun to whiten the Connecticut garden. "Emily, what piece did you play at the competition?" Helen asked, carving the turkey. Emily smiled proudly. "Chopin's Nocturne No. 9 No. 2. My teacher said it was a difficult choice for a middle schooler, but I won first place." As expected of Martha's daughter, Helen's eyes sparkled. "You truly have talent." Nancy gripped her fork tightly, silently tearing apart a dinner roll. Martha noticed this and casually directed the conversation toward Toby. "And how about you, Toby? Are you enjoying school?" The awkward 15-year-old boy shrugged. "It's fine. Toby got a good grade on his science project last week," Nancy quickly added. Helen's eyes widened at hearing this. "That's wonderful." But a few minutes later, Helen returned to talking about Emily. "By the way, Emily, are you taking any other lessons besides piano?" As the conversation continued, Martha felt Nancy's expression darkening. Throughout dinner, Helen repeatedly praised Emily's successes, and whenever Toby became the topic, she would dismiss it by saying, "But he still has time. Why can't you be more like Emily?" Those words came from Helen's mouth while they were eating dessert. It was when Toby was talking about his homework. Martha froze. The table fell silent for a moment. Toby's face turned red as he stood up. "Bathroom," he said as he left the room. "Mom," Martha said in a lowered voice. "Don't say things like that." "What?" "It's the truth," Helen replied innocently. "Emily excels in both academics and music. If Toby tried a little harder." Nancy suddenly rose to her feet. "Excuse me," she said, following her son. Martha sighed inwardly. This wasn't the first time such comparisons had been made. After dinner, while washing dishes in the kitchen, she recalled her own childhood with her sister. When she was 9 and Nancy was 6. Helen always called Nancy "my little gem" and treated Martha strictly, saying "try harder." When Martha won second place in a speech contest, Helen said, "not first place." Meanwhile, every drawing Nancy made was displayed on the refrigerator. Martha went to medical school and graduated with honors. But even during that time, Helen's attention was focused on Nancy's struggles at art school. When Nancy dropped out of school and became pregnant at a young age, Helen defended her. "She's sensitive," she often said. Ironically, when Martha gave birth to Emily, Helen's attitude changed. She began to praise Martha and doted on Emily. Meanwhile, she adopted an "if only you would try harder" attitude toward Nancy and Toby. Martha was bewildered by her mother's sudden reversal. Nancy was hurt by this change and gradually grew more bitter. The kitchen door opened, and Nancy entered. Her eyes were red and swollen. "Nancy, don't mind Mom," Martha said gently. "Toby is a wonderful boy. He just has his own pace." "You don't understand," Nancy said in a low voice. "Your life is perfect. A wonderful career, a talented daughter. I She broke off. As Martha was about to say something, Emily's voice came from the living room. Mom, my blood sugar feels strange. In the weeks that followed, Emily's blood sugar levels became unstable. Normally, her management was perfect, but several sudden high blood sugar episodes occurred. Martha began to check her daughter's diet more strictly. Did you eat anything at school? Martha asked. Emily shook her head. Nothing. But what? Grandma brought cookies when she visited last week. Martha frowned. Did you eat them? Just a little. But when I refused, Grandma said, your mom is too strict, so. Martha took her daughter's hand. Emily, your health is the most important thing. You can say no, even if it's to Grandma. On the way to the hospital, Martha gripped the steering wheel tightly. The events of the past few weeks ran through her mind. Emily's erratic blood sugar levels. The increased visits from her mother and sister. And recently, Emily hadn't been as energetic and seemed like she wanted to say something. After parking her car in the hospital lot, she hurried to the elevator. Martha paused for a moment in front of the hospital room door. Taking a deep breath, she tried to calm herself. Since receiving the call about Emily's deteriorating condition, her heart had been pounding relentlessly. She put her hand on the doorknob and slowly turned it. Emily. The sight that greeted Martha as she entered the room was one she could never have imagined. Her mother Helen and sister Nancy were already there. Emily lay in bed, looking unwell, but the two adults were sitting around her in an obviously relaxed atmosphere. Oh, Martha, Helen turned and said with surprise. You're here already? How was the meeting? Before answering, Martha scanned the room. Her eyes stopped at the bedside table. There, an unbelievable pile of sweets was stacked, chocolate bars, cupcakes, cookies, and a half-sized chocolate cake. I made sure she ate properly, Helen said with a proud smile. At first she was hesitant, but when I told her, it's okay to have sweets once in a while, she started eating bit by bit. Martha felt the blood drain from her face. What are you doing? Her voice trembled. Emily has diabetes. Helen blinked in surprise. A little bit should be fine, shouldn't it? You're always too strict. Children should be allowed to enjoy sweets like children sometimes. A little bit? Martha's voice cracked with anger and fear. This isn't a little bit. Look at the table. This is dangerous. Nancy remained seated, looking at Martha with cold eyes. Don't overreact, she said. Emily was enjoying herself. Toby eats cake all the time and has no problems. Martha was speechless. She rushed to Emily and placed her hand on her forehead. Hot. Abnormally hot. Emily, are you okay? How do you feel? Emily looked up at her mother with dull eyes. I feel sick, Mom, she said in a hoarse voice. My stomach hurts. Martha immediately took out the glucometer to measure her daughter's blood sugar. As the needle pricked her, Emily let out a small cry. It hurts. I'm sorry, honey, it's okay, Martha said gently. A few seconds later, the reading appeared. Martha froze in horror. More than 3 times the normal value. A dangerous hyperglycemic state. Call a nurse. Martha shouted at Nancy. Though looking displeased, Nancy pressed the nurse call button. You're overreacting, Helen sighed. In my day, parenting was more tolerant. Today's parents worry too much about everything. Martha ignored her mother's words. All her attention was focused on Emily. Her daughter's breathing had become labored, and her face was turning pale. Mom, Emily suddenly clutched her stomach and curled into a ball. It hurts so much. The next moment, her eyes rolled back, her body stiffened, and she fell from the bed to the floor. "Emily!" Martha screamed. She knelt on the floor and checked her daughter's pulse. Weak, but present. "Someone! Help!" Martha shouted toward the hallway. Nurses rushed in, and doctors were immediately called. Emily was taken to the emergency treatment room. In the waiting room, Martha sat facing the wall, covering her face with both hands. Her mind was in turmoil. Why had her mother and sister done this? Didn't they understand how dangerous it was to give a diabetic patient large amounts of sugar? Helen and Nancy sat on the opposite side of the waiting room. Helen occasionally wiped her eyes with a handkerchief, while Nancy stared out the window expressionlessly. "Why did you do this?" Martha asked quietly, but with anger. "I've told you many times," Helen responded defensively. "I just wanted to let her have sweets occasionally." "You're always too strict." "That's to protect Emily's life." Martha's voice rose. "Diabetes is a life-threatening condition." "You always exaggerate," Nancy said coldly. "Toby can eat sweets without any problems." "Toby doesn't have diabetes," Martha shouted. She normally didn't lose control of her emotions in public, but now she couldn't help it. "Do you understand what you've done? Emily is in danger of losing her life." 3 hours passed. Finally, a doctor appeared in the waiting room. Dr. Hamilton, he faced Martha with a serious expression. "Your daughter is stable now. We've managed to lower her blood sugar with insulin treatment and 4 fluids." Martha leaned against the wall in relief. Thank you so much." However, the doctor continued, "There are some concerns. Let's look at the test results." He took out a tablet and showed Martha the screen. It was a record of Emily's blood sugar levels for the past month. "Look at this. Over the past 3 weeks, there have been at least 6 instances of dangerously high blood sugar levels. And they occur in an irregular pattern. Normally, diabetic patients' blood sugar levels show somewhat predictable patterns, but in Emily's case, we see sudden spikes." Martha stared at the screen and gasped. "I didn't notice." Emily was measuring and recording on her own. "One more thing," the doctor lowered his voice. "When we pumped Emily's stomach, we found a large amount of sugar. This suggests there has been continuous excessive sugar intake, not just today." Alarms went off in Martha's head. This wasn't just an accident. Continuously. She slowly turned and looked at her mother and sister. They were still sitting in the corner of the waiting room. "I want to see Emily," Martha told the doctor. "Of course. However, she's still not fully conscious. Recovery will take time." Back in the hospital room, Emily was sleeping peacefully. Her color had returned somewhat, but her small body connected to IVs and heart monitors looked painfully fragile. Martha took her daughter's hand and silently wept. "I'm sorry, Emily," she whispered. "Mom should have been more careful." Her gaze fell on Emily's bag, which the nurses had brought over with her belongings. Thinking there might be answers there, Martha reached for the bag. What came out was a small blue notebook. Martha opened it with trembling hands. It was more of a health management journal than a regular diary, used to record blood sugar levels and food intake. Emily, being meticulous, had recorded her daily values in neat handwriting. Turning to the first page, Martha found records beginning about a month ago. Among the regular entries, several notes written in red pen caught her eye. October 15th, Grandma brought chocolate cookies. I refused, but was told, your mom is too overprotective. I ate just one. Blood sugar 245. October 18th, Aunt Nancy visited and brought cake, saying, Toby eats this all the time. I didn't want to eat it, but if I refused, she would start talking about Toby, so I ate a little. Blood sugar 280. October 23rd, Grandma and Aunt Nancy came together. They said, "Let's keep this our secret," and left chocolate bars and brownies. I didn't eat them, but at night Aunt Nancy came to my room and said, "Toby will be sad if you don't eat them." I ate a little. Felt sick. Blood sugar 320. Martha gasped. The records continued. November 2nd, when I got home from school, Grandma was waiting. She said, "This is our secret from Mom," and tried to make me eat an ice cream cake. When I refused, she got angry. She said, "Do you think you're better than Toby?" I didn't understand what she meant. But I was scared, so I ate a little. Blood sugar 385. November 7th, Aunt Nancy came again today. She said in a strange voice, "You're always so perfect, aren't you?" She brought sweets again. When I refused, she started crying, saying, "Do you think your mom doesn't trust us?" I was confused and ate some. I felt really sick. Blood sugar 410. I want to tell Mom, but Grandma says, "Don't worry your mother," so I can't say anything. Martha's hands shook. Tears streamed down her cheeks. The last page was dated yesterday. November 12th, today I collapsed at school. I was taken to the hospital. Mom has a meeting. Grandma and Aunt Nancy are coming to visit. I'm scared. Martha closed the diary and covered her face with trembling hands. This wasn't an accident but intentional. Her mother and sister had been endangering her daughter's health. Why? Why would they do such a thing? The door opened, and a nurse entered. "Dr. Hamilton, security would like you to review some surveillance camera footage." Martha stood up in surprise. "Emily. She's still sleeping. The doctor is with her, so please don't worry." Escorted to the security office, Martha found the head of security standing in front of a monitor. "Dr. Hamilton, please look at this." He operated the keyboard and played surveillance camera footage from Emily's room. The date display showed it was from the past month. The footage showed Helen and Nancy repeatedly visiting Emily's hospital room. And after they left, Emily struggling in bed. The last footage played was from today. Helen and Nancy entered the room, talking and smiling as they placed sweets one after another on the table. It clearly showed Emily initially refusing, then reluctantly eating when Helen said something. Nancy watched with cold eyes as Emily gradually became unwell. This is... Martha was at a loss for words. "We've already contacted the police," the head of security said quietly. "There's suspicion of child abuse." Wait, Martha was confused. "Let me first hear what they have to say." He thought for a moment, then nodded. "Understood. Your family is in the waiting room." Martha walked heavily toward the waiting room. Her head was filled with anger, sadness, and confusion. Entering the waiting room, she found Helen and Nancy sitting quietly. They both looked tired, but something was different. The expression in their eyes wasn't guilt, but something that looked almost liberated. "Why?" Martha's voice trembled. She placed Emily's diary in front of them. "Why did you do this?" Helen and Nancy looked at each other. Silence filled the room. "Answer me." Martha cried. "You're my mother and sister. How could you do this to my daughter?" "You were always perfect," Nancy suddenly spoke. Her voice was cold, yet full of emotion. "In school, at work, as a mother. Everyone always praised you and Emily." Nancy stood up and walked toward the window. Her shoulders were shaking. "Toby is treated as inferior to everyone. Why can't you be like Emily? Even at that Thanksgiving, Mom." So? So you hurt Emily? Martha asked in disbelief. Nancy turned around. Tears had welled up in her eyes. I wanted to break your perfect family. I thought if Emily got sick, you would suffer too. Martha was shocked into silence. Her sister's confession was so cruel, beyond understanding. Nancy. Helen cried out, as if to stop her daughter. No, Mom. Let's stop hiding, Nancy said coldly. Tell Martha that this is all your fault. Martha looked at her mother in confusion. Mom. Helen was silent for a long time. Finally, she spoke. Nancy has always suffered, her voice was small. I always wanted to protect her. So you put your granddaughter in danger? Martha demanded fiercely. At first. I just wanted to let Emily have sweets, Helen said. You seem to be restricting her too strictly. But Nancy, she was angry. With Emily being praised by everyone, while Toby. And you protected her again, Martha said bitterly. While endangering my daughter's life. Helen bowed her head. I was wrong, she finally admitted. Outside the room, 2 uniformed police officers could be seen standing in the hallway. Time was running out. Mom, Nancy, Martha said with a shaking voice. As a doctor and as a mother, I have to report this to the police. This is child abuse, and a deliberate attempt to harm someone. Martha. Helen's eyes widened in fear. We're family. Family doesn't hurt each other, Martha said sadly. Emily was in life-threatening danger. This is unforgivable. After an intense argument, Martha tearfully waved to the police officers. The 2 officers came in, the situation was explained, and Helen and Nancy were taken into custody. Martha collapsed in the hospital hallway, sitting there with her trembling body, crying. For a long time, she remained there. The weight of the decision to turn her family over to the police was crushing her heart. Dr. Hamilton. Looking up, she saw Emily's attending physician. He sat down beside her and placed a hand on her shoulder. You did the right thing, he said gently. Your daughter's life was saved. Martha nodded. Thank you, she answered in a hoarse voice. Emily is awake, the doctor smiled. She's asking for you. Martha stood up and wiped away her tears. She slowly opened the door to the hospital room. On the bed, Emily weakly smiled. Mom, she whispered. Martha hurried to the bedside and took her daughter's hand. Emily's hand was warm and weak, but Martha felt the definite pulse of life. I'm sorry, Mom, Emily said with tears in her eyes. I should have told you about Grandma and Aunt Nancy sooner. No, you did nothing wrong, Martha said gently. From now on, I'll protect you. Emily's hand tightly gripped Martha's. In the solemn atmosphere of the courtroom, Martha slowly stood up. Tension hung in the air. She walked toward the witness stand, placed her hand on the Bible, and took the oath. Her eyes momentarily caught Helen and Nancy sitting in the defendant's box. Are you certain that your mother and sister intentionally endangered your daughter's health? The prosecutor asked. Martha took a deep breath. Yes, her voice, though quiet, resounded throughout the courtroom. Emily's diary and the hospital surveillance camera footage prove it. The testimony lasted an hour. Martha spoke about everything, from the complex family history to Emily's diabetes diagnosis, and finally the terrifying incident. Her voice trembled at times, but her determination to tell the truth never wavered. Can you tell the court how this betrayal has affected you? Martha looked at the defendants. Something inside me broke, she said quietly. Because I believed that family was supposed to protect each other. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Emily, after recovering, also took the stand. She bravely spoke about what her grandmother and aunt had done to her. On the final day, the verdict was announced. Helen and Nancy were found guilty of child endangerment and each sentenced to prison terms. As she left the courthouse, Martha wondered, what would happen to Toby now? Dr. Donahue, Martha contacted the child welfare social worker. I need to talk to you about Toby. A few days later, Martha visited Toby. He had been taken in by a good foster family and was receiving appropriate support for his learning disability for the first time. Initially wary, Toby began to open up little by little when Martha conveyed that she was concerned for him as his aunt. At the same time, Martha herself began psychotherapy. Being betrayed by family leaves deep wounds, the therapist said gently. It takes time to face that pain. Time passed. Emily fully recovered, and Martha returned to work. And 6 months later, a letter arrived. It was from Helen Hamilton. It took Martha a week to open the letter. Dear Martha, I have done something unforgivable to you and Emily. Every day, I am acutely aware of my foolishness and sinfulness. My spoiling Nancy and being strict with you was probably the beginning of this tragedy. I don't ask for forgiveness. I just want you to know that I truly regret my actions. Martha finished reading the letter and sighed deeply. Could she forgive? She didn't have an answer yet. But she didn't throw the letter away, instead tucking it into a drawer. In their new home, Martha and Emily were preparing dinner together. Emily's diabetes was stable, and she was enjoying school life. Standing in the kitchen, she asked her mother, Mom, what do you think a real family is? Martha stopped cutting vegetables. Loving each other, cherishing each other. And no matter what happens, never hurting one another. As her words quietly echoed in the room, the phone rang. It was from Toby. Hello, Toby, Martha smiled. Yes, of course. How about dinner together this weekend? Emily would be delighted. Hanging up the phone, Martha turned back to her daughter. Family is something you can choose, Emily. And we can create a new family. Emily hugged her mother's arm. Outside the window, the gentle spring sunshine shone brightly, as if heralding a new beginning.